I thought we would take a look at another short story for our EOM task, another model. The two that Wit and Wisdom gave us, they were boring. I didn't like them. So got this one instead. The title is The Weaver's Thread. I guess I could do a picture here. Oh, look at that loom. Perfect. Eh? Oh, man. Oh, gosh. Eh. Hold on. Give me a second. Let me rearrange some stuff here. All right. So my main character in the story, The Weaver's Thread, that's going to be him. His name is Thomas. All right. So I'm just going to kind of go through the different parts of the story within the plot map, like the exposition, all the way to the resolution, where the conflict is resolved at the end of the story. Kind of just highlight some different parts that we're looking for. So you get a meeting on this assignment because you're very smart and capable of doing it. So here's the beginning of my story. Like I said, my main character, right there, that guy, his name is Thomas. Let me get my pen up here. There we go. Hello. All right. So right away, your teacher should be able to distinguish who your protagonist is, who your main character is. So in the small town of Caron, nestled between the dense woods and rolling hills of medieval England, there lived a peasant named Thomas. His family had worked hard the land for generations, and though their holdings were modest, they had never known anything else. Each morning, Thomas rose with the sun, his callous hands stiff from the previous day's labor, and his mind clouded with the weight of his life. So great start. We have a lot of descriptions as far as like a setting. So we got dense woods, we got rolling hills, we know we're in England. So as you're looking at like your different narrative elements, you want an interesting exposition, hook your reader. Setting is one of the easiest ways to start your story. And then as we kind of move on, his family is working for generations. So as we kind of look at the rest of the exposition, we're starting to see how society has kind of like influenced Thomas as a person. It talks a little bit about his family, peasants forever, working the land forever for a king that we'll kind of meet later on, and just kind of going through how each day what his life looked like. And obviously he's kind of not happy with it. The weight of his life is heavy. He doesn't like his life. So kind of a bummer to start out. I think I can. Okay. So now we got to have some type of problem, right? We can't just have a whole story about Thomas and his life sucking, being a peasant in the Middle Ages. So the Lord of the Manor, Sir Roland. So here we have another character. You got to have other characters within your story. Resided in a stone keep on the hill, an imposing figure whose wealth and influence seemed as distant as the stars themselves. Sir Roland's rule was absolute, as was the burden he placed on Thomas and his fellow peasants. Taxes, tithes, and labor were the price for the land they worked and the crops they harvested. It was a life of servitude, but as life Thomas knew, a life woven into the very fabric of his identity. Ooh, I like that. Woven into the fabric of his identity. He's a weaver. He makes clothes and stuff. So, yeah, that's good. So here we have Sir Roland, and we had kind of looked at how society affects us as well. We're looking at things that people do to us. So Sir Roland has got taxes, makes him do a lot of labor on the land for free. And he even says here, like, his influence and wealth seemed as distant as the stars themselves. So he's kind of like this figure in charge, and there's really nothing Thomas can do. All right, so he's kind of just stuck in his role as a peasant. So this would be like actions, things that people do to us, and it could also fit into like the opportunities that were given by Sir Roland to certain people. Obviously, not the peasants. But here we have our problem with Sir Roland. He's kind of like our antagonist of the story. Then as we kind of move on, your rising action will probably be where your meat and potatoes of your story is. This is where you kind of like maybe introduce some other characters. Maybe you'll have a few more actions take place. And we're going to have some dialogue too. I want you to try dialogue in your story. It doesn't have to be a lot, but I would like for you to try it. So let's continue. One day, as Thomas sat in a small, dimly lit cottage working on a fine piece of cloth for the market, a figure entered the door, his childhood friend, Alice. I probably shouldn't have spelled Alice that way. Sorry. Either way, another character. She is dressed in simple garb, as most peasants were, her face a mixture of curiosity and excitement. Thomas, she said breathlessly, comma, quotation, I've heard whispers, period. There's talk in the village of change. The king's men are coming, period, quotations. Thomas paused, his fingers still on the loom. He had heard the rumors too, murmured on the lips of the traders and elders alike, but he had paid them little mind. Change, after all, was for those in power to shape it, not for the ones of the likes of him. Change? What change? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Alice sat beside him. Her eyes were wide with excitement of something beyond her station. They say the king is offering land to those who can prove their worth, no matter their birth. That man like you, Thomas, could rise above the dirt if he shows his skill or strength. So here we have like the Sir Roland, as we kind of went back to before. He's offering a piece of land, which once again, peasants didn't own land. He kind of talks about, Thomas talks about like that power, was for a power to shape, but not for the likes of him. Like he's a peasant, he doesn't get to own land. And so now we have like a possibility of like maybe if Thomas makes an amazing piece of clothing for the king, he could have this land. So he's kind of like breaking out of his role in society here. He can own land and move his way up in the hierarchy. And once again, great examples of like punctuation and characters talking. Whenever there's like a new character talking, you kind of hit enter. So yeah, kind of have our story kind of moving along here with some rising action. We even have like, some thoughts and some feelings from our secondary characters here. We got Alice feeling curious. She's excited. Obviously, Thomas is going to mirror that as she kind of tells him what he's, tell him about this opportunity for him as well. And then moving on, we have the climax. So like, this is when Alice is going to pretty much, once again, how do people influence us and like affect our identity? Alice here is going to pretty much like talk Thomas up and like get him out of his funk and say, hey, you can do this. So Thomas shook his head, incredulous. Ooh, great word. And what would a weaver like me do with the land? What do I know of wealth and power? He paused, looking at the cloth before him, his fingers lightly tracing the threads. I've known nothing but the loom, Alice. My father before me, his father before him. We work on the land for the Lord, and then we take what we are given. There's no changing that. Alice's expression softened. But you're not just a weaver, you're a creator. You make something from nothing. That's worth something. More than you think. Ooh, powerful stuff. So kind of like, you hear lovely music if this was a movie, because this is the climax of the story. Alice is, once again, affecting his identity, giving him the courage, giving him influence to kind of take on this task and maybe even like own land, move his way up in the social hierarchy. So once again, society, people within society affecting Thomas's identity. All right, let's find out what happens here. Then your falling action, probably like a smaller part of your story. The next day, as Thomas worked the loom, the thought lingered. He watched the intricate patterns form in the fabric, threads crossing and intertwining in ways that seemed to mirror his own thoughts. He had the skill, the talent, the ability to create something of value. But could he leave behind the life that he had defined him? Could he break free from the expectations placed on him by birth and become something more? As the seasons passed, Thomas wrestled with these questions. The king's men came to the village, and for the first time in his life, so kind of have like a first time in his life, Thomas stood at the crossroads of destiny. He could choose to remain in the quiet comfort of the life he knew, humble, steady, a man defined by the land and the labor of his ancestors, or he could step forward and claim his worth and take a chance at a new life, not one dictated by the birthright of a peasant, but by his own ambition. So yeah, he's kind of thinking now like, yep, I'm not just going to be happy with being a peasant for the rest of my life. I want more. Alice kind of helped me. A part of my society helped me realize this, and here we go. I'm gonna try to get that parcel of land. Resolution here. So the story kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but that's okay because we kind of like our resolution to the story is that Thomas is going to try with this competition. So yeah, in the end, Thomas chose the loom, but not in the way he once had. He worked harder, craft finer goods, and began to think of himself not as a servant to the land, but as an artist, a creator. Yeah, his identity is changing here. His identity, once shaped entirely by his place in the social hierarchy, began to change. Slowly but surely, Thomas wove the story of his life into something new, a tapestry of hope, skill, and possibility. The world did not change overnight, and society still bore down heavy on the shoulders. But for the first time, Thomas understood that his identity was not solely defined by the world around him. It was also shaped by the threads that he chose to weave into his own story, and perhaps in the end, that was enough to carve a new place for himself into the world. Ooh, powerful ending. Once again, we don't know if he won the competition, but our conflict is resolved. He has decided that he is going to choose this. His identity has changed even throughout this very short snapshot of a story. Really, as far as like the events that happened, the most important event was really Alice kind of speaking with him, a conversation, and that's fine. Like this story is going to get a meeting. It doesn't have to be like 10 pages. It's like a small snapshot of like a larger picture. And like I said, we don't even know if he won in the end, but his identity had changed, and we had plenty of examples of how society affecting his identity, whether that be his family before him, whether that be Sir Roland, whether that be Alice, whether that be like his job that he kind of placed limitations on him as well. He had changed for the better. So yeah, that's an example of a meeting story, and I think it's a little better than the ones Wit and Wisdom gave us. This is in School G for you to look at too. Cross-reference if you're looking at different ways to include dialogue, include a great exposition or beginning to your story. So yeah, this is in School G for you to look at. But yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm here all week.